Hello.
Olá, muito obrigada. Boa tarde a todos, a todas. Temos a parte mais difícil do dia, justamente após o almoço, quando as pessoas estão quase dormindo, digerindo. Foi uma manhã muito empolgante, então elas querem saber o que fazer, o que encontrar, o que pensar para amanhã. Enfim, nada importa mais do que o fato de que estaremos discutindo a interseção entre gênero e clima, que o que, a meu ver, para ser algo, para não ser egoísta e muito objetiva, é a coisa mais importante. E entendemos que temos aliados tão poderosos, enfim, aqui comigo na minha turma, que se dermos um bolo, um pedaço de bolo, elas conseguem voar. É minha equipe, minha turma de mulheres amigas aqui. Enfim, para mim é um enorme prazer, estou muito empolgado e gostaria de externar minha gratidão ao F20 e ao ICS, Instituto Clima Sociedade, para termos a oportunidade de travar essa conversa. Acredito mesmo que precisamos ter uma lente de gênero bastante distinta ao falarmos sobre clima, porque como já vimos no sul do Brasil recentemente, o clima não afeta todos da mesma forma. Ou seja, o clima não chove em todo mundo, sobre todo mundo da mesma forma. Eu sei que estou pregando para os convertidos aqui, mas muitas vezes eu digo isso aos homens e eles me olham pensando e dizendo: o que você quer dizer? Bom, você tem uma capa, algumas pessoas não têm capa para se cobrir quando chove, alguns têm um abrigo, outros não têm um abrigo quando chove. Ou seja, a pessoa acaba estando mais exposta a mais violência, os cuidadores também se veem numa grande angústia. Ou seja, a coisa começa a incutir na cabeça das pessoas, mas não tanto. A razão pela qual estamos aqui é porque nos demos conta de que a filantropia, no contexto do G20, ainda não encontrou o seu lugar distinto ainda. Isso por algumas razões. Primeiro, o governo ainda não conhece muito bem o tema. Há bastante preconceito. O governo não está habituado a trabalhar junto com os filantropos, de modo que tem toda uma propedêutica, uma pedagogia aqui, uma educação. E acreditamos muito em aproximar mais a filantropia do governo. É um objetivo que compartilhamos com o F20 também, ou seja, fazer com que a comunidade dê filantropia, seu papel e a sua vantagem comparativa possa exibir aos olhos dos líderes do G20 que a filantropia, com efeito, pode fazer muita coisa para ajudá-los em suas prioridades. De qualquer modo, nós somos uma rede da OCDE, uma rede de fundações que trabalha em prol do desenvolvimento. E, com efeito, temos alguns membros baseados no Sul e temos membros muito atuantes em matéria de igualdade de gênero com uma abordagem de gênero, ou seja, uma abordagem de clima também. Estamos procurando ver como acelerar o papel da filantropia. E o que eu gostaria de ouvir aqui dos meus distintos palestrantes e colegas é a série de diferentes iniciativas em andamento no Brasil que se prestariam a receber mais filantropia, para que a filantropia possa acelerar o seu ritmo, mesmo após concluída a sua presença a campo, de modo a assegurar uma coalizão de esforços. A filantropia não resolverá todas as questões ou nenhuma das questões que o G20 quer abordar, porque não tem o dinheiro nem tem atração. Mas o fato é que nenhum dos setores conseguiria também, então teremos que fazer em parceria. Nosso objetivo, portanto, é romper essas barreiras e amplificar a voz da filantropia, exibir exemplos concretos e propor resultados concretos que depois poderemos preparar até novembro e depois dar continuidade com a presidência sul-africana do G20 ano que vem. Todos sabem muito bem disso. E isso é muito próximo da presidência, da agenda da presidência do G20 Brasil, e ninguém melhor para falar sobre isso do que a Renata Amaral, secretária de Assuntos Internacionais e Desenvolvimento do Ministério de Planejamento aqui no Brasil. Ela viaja muito e nos deu a honra de sair da sua agenda tão movimentada para estar conosco aqui. Fico muito grata, portanto, Renata, passo-lhe a palavra para poder nos falar a título introdutório sobre o tema em pauta. Muito obrigado.
Thank you very much, Patil. I actually just arrived from Kenya yesterday. I'm flying to Manaus in 2 hours, and then I'm going to be in Paris with Patil over the weekend. So yeah, it's quite, it's a complicated time, but at the same time, it's an honor to serve the government in this position. So thank you so much. It's my pleasure to be here. with my friend. I remember while you were speaking, I was thinking about our conversation 1 year ago in Paris about the G20 presidency, the Brazilian presidency, and the struggles with the India presidency. And now we are suffering most of the same issues, actually. But it's good to be here. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to do my remarks in English as was requested. Mas boa tarde, acordem, por favor, né? Após o almoço.
Good afternoon, everyone, and please make sure you wake up. It's post-lunch, but do wake up.
Gender and sustainability, they're including climate issues. Actually, let me just make one point here. Since I became secretary, I stick to my remarks because it's very dangerous not to do so. So I'm gonna read. I learned that in the beginning, so I'll stick to my remarks. So gender and sustainability are priority topics on the government's agenda since last year, 2023, with the election of President Lula. It was a turning point from what we lived in the previous years with the strengthening of the Ministry of Environment and the recreation of the Ministry of Women. Climate and gender are equally at the core of our policy priority at the Ministry of Planning and Budget in Brasilia. I would like to take this opportunity actually to highlight that our ministry particularly values women's work. We have a female minister. I'm the first secretary for International Affairs female since the 60s. So I have the first deputy secretary, the first chief of staff, a woman, the first director is a woman. There were no women in that secretary since the 60s, only the ones answering the phone. So I changed everything, yeah. I don't know what's gonna happen. I don't know what's gonna happen when I leave. Maybe it's going to, we'll see. Putting gender and climate agendas into the philanthropic perspective, which is the goal of this event today and tomorrow, given that philanthropy's economic impact is far from neglectable, is of its essence. In the United States, for example, the philanthropy work is estimated at approximately 2% of the country's GDP. In Brazil, some studies indicate that the number is higher than 4%. So I'm going to make my remarks in dividing three categories to make it more organized. So women empowerment and climate change. It's not necessary to spend much time explaining the devastating impacts that climate change can have on countries' development and people's lives, especially in the view of the catastrophic events in Brazil, the events the Brazilian state of Rio Grande do Sul has been recently facing. Actually, I was in Kenya last week, and the same kind of floods were happening in Kenya. It was disastrous, was horrible. And this week is happening in Europe, right? So it's all over the place. As you might know, the state of Rio Grande do Sul in Brazil is undergoing right now the worst climate event in its history, with the massive record floods that comprised nearly 90% of the state, including Porto Alegre. The volume of rain over the state of Rio Grande do Sul between April and May caused an unprecedented environmental catastrophe, suddenly increasing the level of fluviometric of large rivers basins that flow into the metropolitan region of Porto Alegre, causing huge floods and landslides. The number of victims, homeless people, destroyed properties, and closed logistical access is increasing every day still. And I'm mentioning this because I'm very much involved in the work at the federal government to raise funds from the multilateral development banks and development agencies and technical assistance and etc. to Rio Grande do Sul. It is important, however, to recognize the distinguished role that women have in climate change, both as victims and as drivers of change. The case of a gender-responsive just transition towards low-carbon economies with quality, decent jobs for women and men is grounded in the Paris Agreement, a just transition of the workforce and the creation of decent work and quality jobs. More recently, in 2023, at COP28, the United Arab Emirates Gender-Responsive Just Transitions and Climate Action Partnership was signed with the support of 68 countries. Brazil is not part of it yet. As we know, the impact of climate change tends to be greater on women than men. and Batil just mentioned that. Data show that women, more than men, tend to live from activities based on natural resources and in sectors with greater vulnerability to climate change, such as agriculture, livestock, energy, activities related to forests, water resources, and health. Women are more easily affected than men by the negative impacts of climate change and climate disasters, especially those living in rural or poor areas. However, in most countries and regions, strategies to address climate pay little attention to the way climate change affects gender differently. Women's participation in building solutions is essential, as research shows that innovation and success are associated with diversity. Women are effective in pioneering community resilience, leading local management groups, protecting their communities against natural disasters, and in ministerial positions. It's a shame, however, that only a few years away from the Sustainable Development Goals deadline, the agenda, the 2030 agenda, the UN indicates that only limited progress has been achieved in gender equality around the world, SDG 5. If we continue at the current development pace, it might take humanity up to 300 years to achieve full gender equality, and I'm sure Anna can talk more about that. According to the World Bank, integrating gender equality into climate investments across sectors and expanding gender-sensitive climate finance is also one of the fundamental axes for overcoming gender inequalities in the context of climate transition. I'm going to mention a little bit more about that in our work with external finance at the Secretary. However, according to data from UN Women, only 0.01% of global finance supports projects that address both climate issues and women's rights. There is need for more resources that goes towards gender-responsive climate initiatives that respond to the needs of both women and men. The second point I would like to make is on gender and climate change in the G20 agenda. On the G20, Brazil has put forward 3 general priorities for our G20 presidency, which comprise the fight against hunger and poverty, SDG 1 and 2, and consequently the reduction of inequality, SDG 10. Energy transitions and the promotion of sustainable development in its economic, social, and environmental dimensions, which articulate some of other SDGs, and the reform of global governance institutions. In this sense, Brazil's G20 presidency has created a task force for global mobilization against climate change, aimed at aligning the international financial system to the objectives of the Paris Agreement. And the G20 has had a working group dedicated to sustainable finance, the Sustainable Finance Working Group, SFWG, which launched in 2021 a finance roadmap with a blueprint to inform the broader G20 agenda on climate and sustainable finance. On the gender front, Brazil's G20 presidency marks the first meeting of the working group on women, on empowerment of women, created in 2023, last year, under India's G20 presidency. The Women Working Group was created to support ministries responsible for driving policy for gender equality and women empowerment in G20 countries, recognizing that investing in the empowerment of women and girls has a multiplier effect in the implementation of all 2030 SDGs, including the climate goal. And I'm sure you're going to hear much more about the work of the working group here during the panel. It is worth highlighting that one of the 7 priorities established for the working group on women empowerment is its creation, at its creation was to promote gender-inclusive climate actions, which means ensuring that all climate investments are gender-inclusive and help reducing inequalities between women and men. Climate justice is also one of Brazil's priorities for the working group this year. The Brazilian presidency wants to reemphasize the disproportionate impacts on climate change on women and girls, and want to enhance the debate on directing financial means to tackle the gender disparities on climate issues. On this matter, Brazil calls attention to other groups in situation of economic, social, and race vulnerability that also tend to be more exposed to climate change impact. A last point I would like to make is how the Ministry of Planning has been working on this agenda ourselves. First of all, the Brazil's multi-year plan, 2024-2027, Plano Plurianual, PPA, you might have heard about it, established social and environmental sustainability and climate and economic development as policy priorities, whereas the gender component was set as an intersectional topic, a transversal topic that permeate all areas and must be permanently taken into account in every development of public policies. These goals are recognized at the highest policy planning level in the country, which also reflects Brazil's priorities for the G20 this year. At our ministry, the Ministry of Planning and Budget, we are constantly working with the development banks to amplify sources and access to resources to promote Brazil's policy priorities. That includes developing innovative financial instruments and policy tools, as well as investing in training and capacity building for gender and climate-related activities. For example, since the floods in Rio Grande do Sul that devastated the state, we have been working intensively with the MDBs, with the multilateral development banks, to expand the future financial sources available to the state. Together, the banks announced nearly $3 billion for technical assistance and initiatives for reconstruction of infrastructure through new credit or reallocation of credit lines beyond the donations as well. We also work to secure domestic resources to projects financed by the multilateral banks are aligned with policy priorities when supported by sovereign guarantee. Thus, last year, we established a dedicated external credit limit for subnational entities projects with environmental or climate-related content. We call it Resolução Verde. We must recognize, however, that more needs to be done in terms of integrating the gender perspective into all the development and financing initiatives we promote, whether or not related to climate and to climate change. With that idea in mind, the ministry has signed several memoranda of understanding with multilateral development banks and international organizations that put together gender at the core of the collaborative initiatives to promote data collection and analysis, training, and capacity building, among others, to focus on reducing gender gaps. One of those initiatives, Anna was part of it, actually was last month, also in line with the initiatives of the G20 Women Empowerment Working Group, we promoted the first ever training for women in key administrative positions in states and municipalities, for mayors, for state secretaries, etc. And the course was about how to access financing lines from external banks, from multilateral development banks, with a particular focus on projects led by women with a gender perspective. When I was appointed to the position, we verified that only 8% of the entire external finance that comes to Brazil are projects presented by women, only 8%. We have currently more than $40 billion in projects financed by multilateral development banks in Brazil. Only 8% goes for projects presented by women. So just to finalize, I would like just to conclude by saying that public policy is a huge drive for promoting social change, and so it's philanthropy. Gender and climate agendas have increasingly been gaining the overdue support they deserve in the public sector across the world. In Brazil, our administration is highly committed with pursuing gender equality and minimizing gender disparities associated with climate issues, like some of the policy initiatives I mentioned during this talk. But the path to equality is long and rough, and much more needs to be done. Gender equality is an agenda that requires wide commitment from women and men, from governments and private sector, and certainly from the third sector as well. I guess this was long, but thank you very much. Nobody's sleeping. I'm glad about it. Thank you. Thank you.
Not only is nobody sleeping, but people are empowered and I think excited. If you hadn't met Renata before, now you understand why we have such a powerful ally. And I have to say, although our panel is not super gender diverse, so I'm glad to see that there are a few men. I think, guys, welcome to our world. It's great to have you. Yes, just for this hour, you get to be a minority. Then you can go back to dominating everything else. So sorry, no, I should not be making fun of you because it's very brave, and I'm very glad that you're here because we need many more men allies. It is not us versus them. And where I'm very worried when I see that these polarized moments end up becoming, how feminism has failed the men and how the women are upset because feminism hasn't been going as far. I think we need to reconcile and to put men and boys back into the equality equation. And with that, I would like to invite our dear colleague and friend, Ana Carolina Carrero, who is the acting resident representative for UN Women here in Brazil, a dedicated activist, and she will introduce you the session, and she will guide us and enable our dear panelists to share their thoughts with you. Over to you, dear Ana Carolina.
Thank you, Batil. Good afternoon, everybody. I will start changing a little bit this role here. So we are four, right? So I will take this chair. Yes, creating some space here, here, and here. So we can be seated and somehow be able to look to one another and have a better conversation on this topic, which is super innovative and urgent. It's it's not so good that we can say that it's innovative, but it's a discussion that we don't usually see when we are in climate related discussions. So it's innovative because we are here gathering some organization and institutions from government, from civil society, from philanthropy, from the UN, and you. And I think that you represent several and different organizations as well. And those type of organizations that we need to be together in order to be able to promote impactful results, in order to be able to really make a difference in women's lives, in our diversity, in our race, ethnicity, gender identity, so all diversity that we can imagine. So we need to work together. So I welcome this discussion promoted by OECD here to be able to identify new ways to work together, government and philanthropy and women's organizations and so on. And also, how can we make and identify different ways and topics to innovate in a way that we can innovate in promote a real change in our lives. So this is the innovation. So how can we discuss the gender perspective in climate solutions? So this is what we will have here. So for this, I want to invite my dearest colleagues and panelists. So Amalia Fisher, the first one. Amalia, who is the general coordinator. Huh? You will create more space? Okay, Okay. Malia Fisher, who is the general coordinator of Ella's Fund, which is part of the Women's Global Fund, right, Amalia? And she is a trailblazer, so I am very proud to be here with you. I also want to invite Graciela Hopstein, the executive director of Rede Como A. I met her today, but I know that she is wonderful as well, and is making a great work in Rede Como A. And I also want to invite Camilo, the chair of the Climate Justice Working Group of W20. It's very nice to meet you in person, Camila. I am really proud as a UN Women representative here. I'm following closely the Women's Empowerment Working Group from G20. So we are partner from the Ministry of Women who is sharing this group, and all the three thematic priorities on work and care economy, violence, especially confronting misogyny and tech-facilitated violence, and also climate justice. And all the connections that we have between these three themes, and also how we can discuss different topics within climate justice. So women's leadership and participation in the climate forums, how can we recognize the solutions promoted by women, and how can we produce and analyze gender-sensitive data, climate-related data, and how can we increase financing solutions that are gender sensitive when we are talking about climate funds and etc. And for this, I want to start with you, Camila, who is, I'm so proud of the W20. I am the part of the board as well, so you are so nice, Camila. So please, Camila, can you share, for example, we have the recent floods in Brazil and the special case in Rio Grande do Sul. Can you highlight, and these floods highlighted the link between climate justice and care economy, with women facing, often acting as frontline workers following disasters, and also victims of violence and the care burden. What are the other issues at the intersection of climate justice and gender that are currently being overlooked by and need more attention?
Thank you. So it's a pleasure being here. Thank you very much. It's an honor. I was listening to you this morning. That was awesome. When it comes to different issues involving women and girls, I think we need to highlight that girls are also there, and they are a majority, and they are unprotected in most of the, especially the post-disasters, right? So I want to highlight 6 topics that are underlooked when it comes to support women in, especially after or post-disasters support, which is the vulnerability is exposure. That's one thing that, like, all the harassment and the assault could be prevented if a woman was part of the planning for the emergency cases. And if the climate risks was assessed improperly, women was like, some women would raise their hand and say, hey, we need to plan a shelter that is specific for women and kids, right? So this is one. The second one is access to resources. Most of the resources that are planned for post-disasters goes to huge engineering infrastructure, but we need to direct resources to plan what we're gonna do during the disasters. Of course, we saw the care economy taking place, but have you seen any woman on the media as a hero or like for the showcase of the civil society doing during the disasters. No, I saw a lot of men in jets and swimming in the polluted water and take the hero position. But who was the ones organizing the shelters? Who was the one managing the volunteers? Who was the one sending the locations of the people to be rescued? That was woman, and none of them was like being highlighted in the greater media, right? So how we can promote these women? We need to make sure that these positions will be planned, because the climate extreme events will continue to happen, and women needs to know what place they will working on when the tragedy comes, because will come, right? By the end, I saw a lot of like discussions between the governments with saying like, what are we gonna do right now? But the woman was like already planning everything and organizing everything. The fourth part is for me, climate-induced migration, because most of the sense of like security and safety that will be compromised, and those women will think like, I need to find another place for me and my kids, for me and my family, and they will try to move to other cities, other states, and we don't have the structure to welcome those women and those families. And last but not least, mental and physical health. Two things. One is the fear of the disaster. Another one is the fear of what is going to happen to you during the disaster, because you don't have the physical power to fight against someone that wants to assault you or your family. But like how we can create a structure in the society to support these women in this place for a physical way. And the other way is the like post-traumatic stress disorder. That is something that is happening right now, and how we can support these women to come back work and come back do their jobs after the disasters. We can overlook this type of issue because will be with us for the rest of our lives. Thank you.
Thank you, Camila. Amalia, we have heard from Camila some of the challenges, only some of them easy ones that would need to be tackled. You represent Funduelas here, a fund that exclusively promotes and is focused on women's rights, on women's leadership. And I'd like you to share with us how Funduelas is working at the intersection of climate justice and gender, with some concrete examples, and how do you see the work you are doing contributing to the G20 discussions and priorities on gender equality?
Just easy. 4 minutes.
I know. You say everything about what happened with women in disasters, and what happened with women and girls right now with the climate change. And what we do is to support women that they are in different parts of Brazil, from the 5 regions of Brazil, and they work against the disasters all the time. Not even about how they respond of the vulnerabilities and damage, but also in mitigation and adaptation. And that is part of the climate justice and gender issues. And we support women that they work with education and climate change. They defend their territories because they are all the time attacked by and treated by speculation of the land. And I'm talking about here about quilombolas. We support indigenous also. We support women in the cities that they are suffering also, as you say, in Rio Grande do Sul. But the most important issue is to see how much money is going for those women that they are taking care of our societies. And women's funds, we are all the time having conversations and dialogues with funders, so we can have more money for women's organization. And I said money, yes, money. I don't say finances, resources. I say money. Women's need money, and women's need to know how to manage that money, even if they are better to manage money than men. And that you can see how women's in their homes, they do everything so they can support their families. And most of those women that you talk about, they don't have a husband, so they do everything alone. So we need also data about how women are dealing with mitigation, adaptation, and resilience. We need that, and for that we need money. And it's for you, maybe it's ugly that I talk about money, but we have to talk about money. And women's, they are in all the biomes, territories, communities, in all over Brazil. And if you talk about how is the percentage that goes to women's, but you talk about in the sense of development. But I am going to talk in the second part about how much money is coming for women to develop their initiatives around the world. And that is very important if we see the budget that we have for development in the world. And Ellis has been supporting from 24 years women's organizations with small and medium funds. And last year we gave 3 million reais to the biggest program that we have, that is moving women's moving building movements. Thank you. She knows very well, and they know because they have been in our dialogues. And how we do that? We have a methodology when we invite women around the country to come and have a dialogue. And they are women from different movements, so they have intersections. They are Black women, they are indigenous, they are young, they are older, they are women that they work on the cities, and they work in the rural area, and they come together and they strategize together and how they are going to work and in alliance to defend their rights, to defend democracy. It's very important to talk about democracy. We are here now because Black women, indigenous, and LGBTQI organizations confront the pandemonium, the pandemonium that we had, and we still have the menace that he can become again. So the second part that I know why foundations should support us has to do with democracy, has to do with human rights, has to do with women's rights, but also has to do with non-human rights. We have to think about all the beings that they are in this world, that they are not human, and they deserve to live as us we live now. And I think that how we can support G20, the presidency, having more partnerships as we have with you and Comoa and others that they are here, with governments, also to support more organizations. In this program that I talk about it, we supported 80 organizations, and we received more than 1,600 applications, and we could only support 80. And from those all, 50%, they told us that they have been suffering for climate change. So imagine if we have more money and if we support the 1,100 organizations only in that program, what we could do with more money. We couldn't support them, all of them, not because they weren't good, because we didn't have enough money. So that is very important. And I am not the only one who is in a women's fund or in a fund for social justice. Here, they are others than they are my colleagues. And maybe you this morning listened to Graciela talking about the front that we are creating. So.
Yeah, we can see that even doubling the amount of resources between 2018 and 2022, according to OECD for gender equality, it's not enough. We need money, right? So Graciela, yes, this is your issue. From your vantage point of Rede Como A, what role can foundations play in supporting gender equality and climate agenda of the Brazilian G20 presidency, especially the interlinked between gender and...
Posso falar em português? Tem tradução?
Can I go
Batendo?
ahead and speak Portuguese? Do we have interpretation, Matilde? Yes. I'm sorry, but I prepared this presentation in Portuguese because I understand we do have simultaneous interpretation available. And so thank you so very much, everyone, one and all. It gives me great pleasure to be here. And I'd like to thank Matilde, as well as all, of course, all of the efforts undertaken to establish this panel. And also I want to thank the Rede Panoa. You heard me earlier in the morning, but I'm going to repeat some of the things which I believe are important to understand the philanthropy ecosystem in Brazil and the role performed by independent funds as well as climate justice funds, which have an important focus on the gender issue. And I'm speaking more generally, which of course involves women as well as the LGBTQIA plus population and the role they perform in the overall philanthropy ecosystem. Brazilian philanthropy is well developed, it is very diversified, and the fact is that we have several different types of.
Yes, well,
I will do my best. Thank you. If you want, I can translate you.
no, I can do it. The problem is I haven't prepared myself.
You need to do them.
Okay. So as I began to talk with you about the ecosystem, Brazilian ecosystem is diverse, is very diversified. It's complex because we have different kind of organization. From one hand, we have corporate and familiar philanthropy, that they are the characteristic of this kind of philanthropy, that is that they don't donate to civil society organization. And when they donate to civil society organization for women or for climate justice or for human rights, the money is not really very representative. On the other hand, we have the independent philanthropy, that they are the organization, independent funds, territorial funds, community funds, and thematic funds, that they are in Common network, that they are really donate to civil society organizations. So we have here a very important player in Brazil that is financing with money exactly civil society organization. And when it related to human rights and gender in general, I think that they are playing a very, very important role. So specifically talking about, when you're talking about gender, I will give you some data. I will show some data I've talked to today during my speech in the morning, but you know, data information is power, so it's important to show that in terms of Comunidad Network, they are working, most of our members are working focused on gender, LGBTQ+, and women, and 75% of the organization, they develop directly initiative, financing initiative in in climate justice. And when we're talking about climate justice and gender, for example, we have that in the past 2 years, they promote more than 40 call for proposals, and they supporting groups and social movements in gender and climate justice, and they have invested 100 million reais for this issue. So we have really a very important player in Brazil. And as I told you during the morning, as I present during the morning, we are doing a different kind of philanthropy. We are working with community philanthropy that is really completely different, because philanthropy plays a specific role with the social movements. They are not imposing ways of acting. They are not working in a top-down way. They are working together with the movements, creative with the movement. So this is very important also to highlight, because it's a different kind of dynamic when I'm talking about philanthropy, because philanthropy here plays an important role, a strategic role, but it's not the only one. They are working with, because climate solutions and gender solutions, they're on the base, they're on the territories, on the communities, and maybe philanthropy can help them with money, financing them to catalyze transformation. So we don't identify ourselves as a big actor in transformation, but together with the movements and with civil society organizations. So unfortunately, we need money, because the numbers are expressive, but we need to fund more. And unfortunately, also 70% of the resources coming from that our funds operate, that are coming from international and cooperation philanthropy. So this is a huge problem. And when we are talking about international philanthropic resources, as I present during the morning, just 12% of the resources are coming from the global north to the global south when it's related to human rights, and that involves gender and other political minorities. So we are really in a very, very complex situation. From one hand, we have really a very important dynamic here. We have an infrastructure, because the independent funds can really reach the communities, can really reach different kind of civil society organizations and social movements. But on the other hand, we need to face the lack of resources, and we are really very concerned about this. So this is my contribution related to your question. I don't know if I did it. Sorry, but my English is
You did perfect.
No,
You
okay,
did
because
perfect.
I haven't prepared myself, so thank you.
You were perfect. So, Graciela, I'm sorry. Thank you, Graciela. Camila, I will call you now. Just to ask, what are the key recommendations of the Climate Justice Working Group of the W20 on how, and how can philanthropy play a role in this area?
Okay, I just want to comment on one thing as part of the you two said, that when it comes to small and medium money or grants that we are talking about, how much is it? It's $10,000, $20,000, $100,000, $200,000. What this do for an organization with 10 people, 50, 100 volunteers? This is type of money that, especially in developing countries, it can do a lot because of the currency, but it's not enough. When you donate like $100,000 for an organization, it's 500,000 reais. it can support a year of operation, but I've been seeing organizations doing 3-year pipeline with this amount of money. This is insane. It's like, it's kind of, and the worst part for me is the report that the grant makers does after, like with a lot of numbers for impact, but the so tiny money for the organizations is struggling to manage the financial part. And the other thing is, like, women-led projects are not a key requirement when it comes to selection of the projects if it's not a fund focused on women. That's the key issue that we need to address. That's one of the key recommendations, especially for the W20 climate justice. If you are funding climate justice projects or just energy transition projects, it must require to be or women-led projects or women with a key role in the leadership of the projects. So then we will have an intersectional point of view for the projects. One other thing that we've been discussing is the gender responsive approach for climate change policies, especially in our NDCs. The time is come that we'll be in our NDC reflecting gender policies. If it does happen this way, we don't have any chance to achieve some real changes regarding climate. Address climate migration with an international human rights perspective. This is something like for the coming 10 years, will be over 100 million people becoming climate refugees. Most of them will be women and girls. And we need to prepare the countries, especially in the global south, to welcome those migrants. And most of that, we need to capacity building. This is something, every time we talk about capacity building, someone raised their hands, normally is G7 countries, saying, oh, it's not in our mandate. What is in your mandate then? Right? I'm always questioning that. If I say, in the morning, someone was saying that we don't have time to the language and the time of the diplomacy. I think was C20 perspective, and this is really true. We don't have the time to understand if promote, improve, or what this means in each mandate. We need to be clear around that, and we need to be clear that women will be priority in these mandates. Last but not least, ensure transformative and gender just transition. We've been talking a lot about energy transition, but the communities, if the energy transition is good for the environment, how we make sure that it's good for the society as well? Because of the the solar farms or the wind farms that have been creating, other social issues are being also generate together, right? I know that we can predict all the social issues that main engineering infrastructure will cause, but most of them we already see happen, and we can learn from other countries, right? So I think this is the 3 key recommendations. So a gender-based approach for the policies, especially looking to our NDC. The second one, women-led project investments, and make sure that all the investments, especially on the adaptation fund, this is something that we are talking about G20, but the G20 countries, they are most of the contributors to the emissions, they are the polluters, right? So we need to connect G20 to the COP discussions. This is other thing that we've been discussing in our climate justice group, because it's not things apart. I know that for the G20, the priority is finance. So we need finance for climate adaptation. We need to equal finance to mitigation and adaptation, and a really gender transformative outlook around, especially the way the money will flow and the systems will flow. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Camila. And thank you for the comments, because they were
Kind of spicy, I know.
yeah, but directed to the point. You are right. So, Amalia, Elas Fund is supported by several foundations. what the difference and what is the comparative value of having foundations financing a fund like Fundo Elas?
Well, first, I'm going to follow you. I didn't say anything about Elas Fund as institution. It was funded by 5 women's feminist, black and no black women. And I am a feminist since I was 20 years and I am 69 years. So you can be very, how can I say, you can be happy and you can be tranquila because what we do, we know what we are doing, and we support, and we started Elas Fund because, and this is very important, and it's linked about the question that you made. Elas Fund was created because in the 90s, most of the foundations that they were in Brazil, they leave Brazil and they were supporting women's rights. But because we had the conference in Beijing, they said, we did enough. Now they have their rights. So we are leaving. And then women's funds started to be created around the world. So we are 47 women's funds around the world in the 5 continents. And we have a network that is Prospera. And we work together and we exchange our knowledge. And now we are exchanging also how we do grant making. Answering the question about $5,000, $10,000, $50,000, Ella support or tiny organizations that they are not registered, and we support also organizations that they are that they have 30 years, because we know that we have to do that. Sorry if I didn't say that because my language is Spanish. I speak in Portuguese all the days, and I have to speak in English now. Now I got it, the English. So.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Amalia. You got the English, but the colleagues.
I only want to say about the data that you said is that only a 0.13% of the official development assistance and only 0.4% of all funding are dedicated to women's rights. And this is very important. So I finish here.
Yeah, thank you. I'm sorry for interrupting you, but we have 3 minutes, Graciela. 3 minutes to close. So what can networks like Rede Como A and OECD's network of foundations working for development do to facilitate foundations' work at the intersection between climate and gender equality?
Well, I think that the most important role is to advocate. I think that advocacy is a really very important strategy to influence exactly big funders and to change philanthropy. So I think that our networks like Como A, Próspera, Alianza de Fondos del Sur, and others that they are working in the independent philanthropy, they are really playing a very important role in advocacy. And on the other hand, I think it's important also to create some collaboration dynamics. And collaboration is something that it's really very easy to talk about, but it's really very hard to do. So we need to collaborate to open more debates, space of debates, and even with a diversity of actors, because we need to bring to the table different kind of actors, because collaboration is not just between the philanthropic actors, but with other actors in the public sphere and regarding the government, etc. So I think that I can finish here.
Yeah, thank you very much, Graciela, Camila, and Amalia. We are in the final minutes. I'm sorry because we are supposed to have some minutes for exchanges and debate, but we won't have. And it's a good and bad sign. A bad sign because we were not able to manage adequately the time, but we need to listen to you because everything you said was super useful and precious. And it's a good sign because it's a signal that we need to continue this discussion. And we need to organize other forum to other space to continue it. So thank you, thank you.
Thank you.
And we have some final words from Catherine Harvey from F20, but I agree, it was good news and bad news. So I would like to give, again, a big round of applause to our panelists. And over to, and Catherine comes with her own mic. This is power.
This is power. Thank you. Thank you very much for this very important conversation. Thank you for everybody for coming here today. Again, thank you all for the male allies who came and joined us. I'm not going to take much time because I am the one who's supposed to keep everybody on time and get this thing wrong. So just basically what I'm taking from today's conversation is, yes, we need to come back to the very, very start of this conversation, which I loved, and that is creating space. I think that was just a very nice symbol for us to see. We need to create the space for us to have these conversations, to build the collaboration, to build the capacity that we need, and really to make sure that women are included in all of these planning processes, if it's the NDCs, if it's the ministerial planning processes. My God, first women since the 60s. Who was alive in the 60s in this room? How many of us? 2? Can you imagine? This is insane. So this is really where we need to work together and make sure that we can, as women and as allies, and for anybody who identifies as a woman or doesn't identify in any other kinds of ways, to really make the space and make sure that everything is included and we are inclusive. And then beyond that, let's get some money into this conversation. It's that we're looking for. With that, everybody back to the plenary. Run! Thank you very much. A big applause to OECD and Batil for organizing this.
Thank you. Just one final word, since I'm not the organizer, I can shamelessly take one more minute. I think Catherine, this is why this partnership is working so well, has summarized it. I would like to say how we take it forward. So Leaders Summit here in November. Right now, we haven't really gotten something to get together on this. So I think we need, together with UN Women and our partners, to reconvene and remember what we said: funding, capacity, advocacy. So how do we get funding to these nice colleagues who know what to do with it, unlike us who sit somewhere else? How do we help advocacy? That's a collective. And building capacity, you do the heavy lifting, but we need to help you as well. So I think we need to find other foundations. This is what we bring with Net Forward, other foundations that work in the international development space to come and see, okay, this is where we can safely put our money. And there's something the Brazilian G20 can say out of it, that, look, we've created collaboration with these people that didn't speak before. So thank you again. I was very humbled by all the power harnessed here. I think you can move mountains. So to be continued. And if you want to be part of moving mountains, come talk to us, any of us at the coffee breaks, so that we figure out how we take on the work. Thank you.